Call the meeting to order for Transportation and Commerce. Would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderman Moore, Alderman Vaquero,
Present.
Alderman Cone, Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Oldenburg, Alderwoman Middlebrook, Chairwoman Davis.
Present.
3 present.
I did see Sam. He was here.
You got a week in here to go.
Okay.
So,
It's okay, 2 out of 3 isn't bad.
yeah, okay. So we do not have a quorum. And what I'd like to do is identify the excused alderperson. Wait a minute, let me follow this agenda first. Yeah. Identify the excused alderpersons. So I just got a message from Alderman Oldenburg. There was a request from Alderwoman Middlebrook, Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Moore was here earlier, but felt ill, and so he went home, so he's being excused. Alderman Cohen is out of town, which was the only one I thought that I was gonna have not here today. So, therefore, we do not have a quorum, and what I'd like to do is still ask the sponsor of the bill to please take the seat here, because there were a couple of questions that I think we can have answered.
Do you have a committee substitute?
That's what I was trying to
So
figure
can I
out.
make a motion to put the committee substitute?
Because you don't have a quorum.
Just for discussion only, I thought we could. So we can't even discuss
No,
the
not for,
substitute?
not even for discussion. No. You can't put the bill before you for action without a quorum.
I thought for discussion. Well, I mean, that's what I thought we would discuss.
And we can get a definitive from the clerk if you'd like, but that's my understanding.
All right. I mean, Jeffrey's been around too a while.
Okay,
If you put it before the committee, it becomes an action item. You cannot take action.
For discussion.
There may be a way to discuss it.
That's what I'm curious. If there's a way that, otherwise,
We can try to discuss it, we just can't technically put it before us, because if we put it before us, it now becomes the 19 committee substitute,
Okay.
even for the next meeting.
okay. So,
But I think
So
that
might-
we
like
can
you said, it might be a way to
It's
do
just
it.
that we can't take action.
okay, no, I believe that.
You sure it's fine?
have a general discussion. Right. That's what we were gonna do.
Okay, no, it sounds good.
Yes, sir.
I'm learning as I go.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
only been 11 years.
All right.
I'm
That's
12-0.
That's what we want to do, okay. So, Alderwoman Spencer, we had a lot of discussion in the last meeting. And it's not for me to say, it's only for you to say. Are you satisfied with the format that your bill is in now?
Madam Chairwoman, we have a bill and a committee substitute. The committee substitute makes the small change referencing the fact that the FAA reauthorization, the federal code that provides for the airport privatization program, was amended through the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018. That was amended and signed by President Trump on October 5th, 2018. And so it did make some significant, I should say, adjustments to that code, which I hope to talk about with this committee in the very, very near future related to a separate issue that this code did amend. But for the purposes of the privatization program itself, it did change the name of it. And it did result in a different federal code. As far as your question being that, I'm not sure I totally understand the question. It did change. The clerk did, per our direction, change that language to reflect the new federal code.
It is definitely here.
Yes, so, and you can see that the federal code 47134 remained the same, but does now reference the fact that it was updated in October 2018.
Okay, well, that was my main thing is if you're satisfied.
Well, in this, I asked the clerk to put this together. He did put this together for us. This is the first time presented here that I'm reviewing it.
You might want to take them home.
So I do see that as referenced in the FAA Reauthorization Act 2018, the airport privatization pilot program was renamed in that amendment. But again, these changes are not substantive to the bill itself, but I do think that, our council should adjust. I was under the impression that would be adjusted, given that the Reauthorization Act of 2018 did change the name of the pilot program. So, leaning on our council to make, again, a non-substantive change to the bill, we would have to change that, I think, to make it accurate. But other than that, these are just, again, as we talked about last meeting, non-substantive changes, because the bill itself, while it does refer to those, those are just sort of descriptives of what we're planning on doing here. So.
Okay, so the other thing I think that Alderman Vaccaro, you just had a few discussion items that you wanted to share.
No, we had talked. I'm not overly, like I said, I've said it in any disrespect. It's a feel-good bill, but I still think the only real way to do this is by charter, changing the charter. And the city attorney made it clear, but that we can't delegate away our vote. But I'm on it as a co-sponsor, and but we're also working together to try to do something that I believe would have a lot more substance with you. But no, I'm on it, and if the sponsor's fine, I'm certainly fine.
And I didn't mean to disrespect you, Alderman
Oh,
Boyd. I just, but he was in my magazine, he had been talking.
That's what it was, I swear.
But I did not do that purposely, sir.
It's okay, you're the chair.
Okay. Jeffrey.
So I just want to be clear, because I'm starting to get confused with the renaming thing. So tell me exactly what it should say that the legal counsel did not take out or did not add, just so that when we come back, it's
Perfect?
perfect.
Sure.
As far as that piece of language.
So you
Unless
can
somebody
see here.
finds some other reason to not like another paragraph or something. I'm just
Isn't it-
concerned about the confusion I have with this word.
Yes, okay, and so, as I mentioned, so the airport privatization pilot program was part of, the FAA has federal statutes under which it operates.
Mhm.
And as part of that, in 1996, the federal government it included a provision that allowed for what was called, at that time, the airport privatization pilot program. That was in 1996. That code has been updated, I believe, 4 times since then, 2002, 2007, and I believe 2018. So maybe that's just 3 times, but nonetheless, 2018 was the last time that federal code was updated.
So that
There were
would be
like
the-
7 provisions in that code of 2018, that amendment. It was 496 pages in total. 7 of them dealt with the airport pilot program, the airport privatization pilot program. And one of the changes in that update was to change the name of that program to the airport investment. We have it, the chairwoman is familiar with the term. It's no longer called, but that's literally the only thing that would need to change. Yeah.
So what am I striking out, or what am I adding, so I'm clear? I mean, just for the sake of committee's time, I'm trying to make sure that whatever needs to be added to this gets added to this, so we don't have another meeting, and then we gotta have another meeting
Okay,
because
so,
of some language.
the exact correct language, let me see here.
Would it be possible for you to share that with the attorney?
You know,
I know we had in the past, but maybe again.
yes. Okay. The airport privatization pilot program was changed to airport investment partnership program. That is the exact language that was passed in 2018. Now, again, when we started this process, I can understand where our council has some, where these terms are not, when we introduced this bill last session, okay, that was before this little change to the name came into play, which was in October 2018. Again, the name of the program is non-substantive, but there were a couple of other little things that changed in the plan under the Trump administration to make privatization easier for cities and for public airports to participate in. If there were other it was my understanding there were no substantive changes requested by the committee nor considered by the committee. As the alderman from the 23rd brought up, our city councilor weighed in that a vote of the people could be considered advisory in nature, but there's nothing unusual necessarily about having an advisory vote, and certainly as elected officials when considering the future of our largest taxpayer-owned asset, and one that the Board of Aldermen, by allowing for privatization, as we discussed last week, would be then transferring our authority to review maintenance, updates, infrastructure, all those responsibilities which currently go before the Board of Aldermen would be transferred to the Secretary of Transportation for the United States.
Right. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on what that new word is supposed to be.
Yes.
I'd like to ask you another question that has to do with airport privatization. I heard something this morning that I wasn't familiar with because I'm not tracking this as some people are. Is it your understanding that in the city charter that the airport could be privatized with only the authority of ENA?
That is a question that we asked last year quite often. We wanted clarity on who would be weighing in. Now, since that time, the mayor and the Board of ENA have it has been widely publicized that there are 4 entities that are involved in the decision-making of the privatization of the airport, one of which is the Board of ENA, one of which is the airlines, one of which is the FAA, and the 4th is the Board of Aldermen.
So we are included.
Now, that has been publicized far and wide in almost every publication in the region, and nationally that has also been publicized. Now, does that mean it's fact? It could be legally considered to be determined, that the Board of ENA is the only entity from the city. That isn't a legal opinion that could be drawn. It could be. I don't know. I am not legal counsel on this particular matter. But this would be the first in recent past that I've heard of anybody seriously considering bypassing or not involving the Board of Aldermen in the final decision making, and I think that would be a gross, to remove the Board of Aldermen from that decision-making at this point would be a gross misrepresentation of our responsibility previously by anybody involved in that decision. It has been, the chairwoman has been very involved in the process on behalf of the Board of Aldermen. We have been assured as a policy-making body that we do have authority in this, and that we will have a say in the final decision.
But I just don't want it to be in a warm and fuzzy way. I want it to be in a legal way. So I'd be very curious as to I would like to get a legal opinion, because that bothers me, that the Board of Aldermen could possibly not play a role in whether or not the airport is privatized. So I would right now like to get a legal opinion from the city councilor.
I would agree with that, although I will have to say that Mr. Garvin has weighed in that the Board of Aldermen will participate. That is in a recorded hearing of the Transportation Committee last session, for
But
which
if
I
it's
was
a
present.
benign
But you're right.
act, it doesn't mean anything. I don't want it to be a benign act. I want it to be a legitimate act.
I would be happy to personally request that legal
Because I
opinion.
know how politics works. People say things to make you feel good in the moment, but they're really not giving you any power or privilege. They're just asserting that you might have some. And there's a big difference from that.
I would agree. If you're asking me to request that, I would certainly be happy to make that request.
And the reason I'm asking you, because your bill, if we don't have a place for this, then it's almost like, why even do the bill, kind of, sort of. I want to put the ball in your court. Because I appreciate what you're doing.
I would be happy to request formally a legal opinion from our city councilor, and if I understand correctly, the legal opinion would be whether or not the Board of Aldermen does have the authority to weigh in and either to authorize,
yeah.
or to reject
Yeah.
a proposal to privatize Lambert Airport.
Correct.
I would be happy to request that from our city councilor.
Okay.
Jeff, I'm just curious, so when they did that with the water department, we were able to weigh in, is that different?
I don't know, because this was just brought to me earlier today, and I thought I would just bring it up at the hearing because they said it was in the charter. Now, I'm going to probably go and look at the charter myself as well, but wanted to hear what all of them from the
That's
20,
why we
what
really
she
did that
knew,
charter thing.
or maybe the chairperson could expound on it. But at the end of the day, I still would like to have a legal opinion that gives me assurance that we have to play a role.
I think that's an important question to ask. I'd be happy to ask it. As we talked about in the last hearing, I think there was some confusion about what the end result of privatization is. Currently, the Transportation and Commerce Committee overhears bills related to financing, maintenance, any updates, any contracts, all things pertaining to the airport are okayed by the Board of Aldermen first through the Transportation and Commerce Committee and then by the full board. With privatization, we would not have any of that authority anymore. And so it is important that if the Board of Aldermen is going to transfer that authority from this body to the Secretary of Transportation for the federal government, we need to okay that. And it needs to be okayed by this Board of Aldermen if we're transferring that major responsibility from this body to the federal government.
I agree, because it's confusing. Most things that's recommended by ENA comes before the Board of Aldermen.
Correct.
So this was a nuance to me that there's a superpower
Yeah.
that usurps the Board of Aldermen
But I will.
in certain instances.
But I will remind you that the contract for the consultant did not go through the Board of Aldermen for approval. In fact, it went only to the Board of VNA. So when I talk about those four entities that have a say in whether we privatize the airport, the Board of VNA has its consultant. They approved that consultant contract without input from this body. The FAA has their own consultants, as do the airline industries. The Board of Aldermen is currently the only entity that does not have independent paid counsel to help us really look through a contract as complicated as a privatization contract can and very well will be.
But the funds for paying for the ENA's consultant that money is not coming to the city of St. Louis, correct?
It will come out of what the city will earn potentially from the privatization contract. So if we decide to privatize the airport for a lump sum, for example, of $100 million, the $800,000 a month that the consultants are racking up will be taken right off the top. So that will come directly out of the proceeds that the city would otherwise see. We will be paying for it. We have no cap on what they can be paid, which is extremely troublesome to me, but they will be paid out of the proceeds of the privatization of the airport.
Okay, so another good question of that legal opinion is to explain how that's possible.
It is
Because it sounds like an appropriation deferred, but still it's appropriation.
agreed, and
So
that is that is a
I'd like to know
concern that
that.
I brought up last year and one I still share today, and I share that with you, especially because the consultants are to be advising us in an unbiased manner on whether or not we should privatize, yet they only get paid if we do privatize the airport. And so both the city councilor and others involved have acknowledged that there could be a conflict in that original agreement. They've acknowledged that through some of the contracts themselves and even described that potential conflict in some of the contracts. I find it very troublesome that that was orchestrated that way and that the payment would come directly off the top of what the city would otherwise be paid for an asset we have owned since 1927.
Yeah, it sounds like
Almost
there must
100
be
years.
some legal reason for the city to have to pay it. I mean, if you want to do us a favor and do a study, we shouldn't have to pay anything. So why should we pay anything out of proceeds? I mean, you just want to come and help us make a good financial decision. So that's interesting. I would love to see that legal opinion justified as well. So there's two opinions, right?
So the opinion would be, the question that we're asking.
Under what authority is ENA able to enter into a contract for, and obligate the city financially without authorization?
Well, if you remember,
Something like that.
there's two contracts that have been signed. The first contract went through Mayor Slay in his last 30 days in office. And that contract was signed with Roe, Missouri. And that was to advise and prepare the original proposal with the FAA. And that proposal was done through the city councilor's office. There is a provision under the city charter that the city councilor's office can hire and retain its own counsel without having to go through the Board of ENA or the Board of
Because it's
Aldermen.
already appropriated.
Correct, and that was dubious, in my opinion. That was a dubious,
That was in round,
say that again.
one of those in round for just. kinda
Exactly,
in
that
round.
is how I would, that is a good way to describe it, and I would agree with you in that. But once that was in place, that consultant wrote the RFP for the consultant we have now, which happens to be one and the same, because the consultant who wrote that RFP and was part of the winning team of that RFP, which certainly represents a conflict of interest, or at least a appearance of one, because the current contract holder was the only applicant who responded to that RFP in full. Now remember that the consultant who wrote that RFP was part of the winning team and part of the only full application to that RFP. Again, extremely worrisome conflict involved in that. And I do think that you bring up a good you call a good question here with how does the Board of ENA have the authority to promise to pay for services without full approval of this body, which should have oversight of major multi-million-dollar contracts for which the city would be obligated to fulfill. I mean, we serve for a purpose, we spend a lot of time and effort scrutinizing things and being held responsible by the general public for our actions down here. And when actions go awry, it is our feet that are held to the fire at neighborhood meetings. I know I feel the heat, and I should. I have put myself in this position. I have taken on a large amount of responsibility by serving my city in this capacity, as have all of us. And so it is really up to us to ask these tough questions. I appreciate you asking them, and I will pass them along to the city councilor and ask by way of a formal request for a legal opinion.
Madam Chair, I don't have any further comments or questions.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is just to expound on that whole situation. As all of you know, in the beginning of this process, most especially when it was the opportunity to sign a contract for this expiration to take place, it was obviously known and or assumed that this Board of Aldermen did not have to have any input. We were never invited to any meetings, any discussions. We finally took it upon ourselves to show up. We were told when we showed up, you cannot come in this meeting. You have no say-so here. Oh, yeah. And so you know the ignorance that we can have sometimes. We went in anyway. And from that point on, it was the insistence on having a part in this. Attorney Garvin was probably the one I would give the most credit to have the understanding that the Board of Aldermen should be a part of the process. But even after being allowed to sit in on that contract to add some, and we added some things to it and changed some things. And I'll give previous Alderman Scott Ogilvie a lot of credit because he stuck with it and we kept going back and analyzing the contract and added some things that made sense. Also, in either having a knowledge or an assumption that we would not be included, it was determined that I don't have a vote on the working group. So even though I'm present, even though I speak a lot, I don't have a vote. So again, that input is not there. But for me, at the end of the day, I don't believe that this process can go any further unless that is factual, what you just stated about the charter. And that is the other reason why I've asked people to be as visual as possible, because just a couple of us in the meetings, we have our financial analyst there. He's there and he's very good. I mean, he covers it. He really watches out for us. But it's important that more eyes are on this. This is a very complicated process. And for those who are not astute in the financial community on the way these deals are done, and or simply understanding the different processes that take place with outsourcing and or some people call it privatization, it can get pretty sticky. And so you have to be prepared. You have to know what to ask for. And before we get to a final decision, it's going to be a while. Plus, in other areas of the country, people created governing bodies that actually oversee the entire process in its perpetuity. And that is a discussion we've not had here yet.
So I have a question. So you represent us there,
Yes, sir.
and they don't let you vote?
No, sir, I don't have a vote on the working group.
That's why we need to change the charter, and the sooner the better.
Yeah.
I've been saying that all along. The only fix is change the charter.
Yeah. But, you know, at the end of the day, what I want to also share is,
But I've never seen, like, okay, so now I sit on, whatever that is, but I have a vote.
Preservation.
Yeah, preservation.
Preservation Board, you have a vote.
And Jeffrey has a vote. I've never seen the chair of a committee sit on something that we didn't have a vote on, but we just sit in for nothing better to do. Even on the airport commission,
I have a
we have a
vote.
vote, because I know I was on the commission.
Yeah.
I've never seen that, where we
Yeah.
were not
But
represented
again,
by somebody.
what he just brought up, and I haven't looked into it either, but if there's an assumption or a known fact, I can see why it's structured that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can believe that. That's why I said, I've been saying all along, I had changed the charter.
But Madam Chairwoman, you're not given a vote because we have a say through this process? Is that my understanding of the sort of why that is?
Someone tried to say that to me, and you know, at the end of the day, I don't care what you're doing, whether I have a vote or not. If I feel like something shouldn't be done or should be done a different way, you're not gonna have a chance to do anything when I get through. because I'm not gonna let you move forward.
Yeah, but if we don't have any say and the only E&A does,
But
good luck.
remember, everything's publicized.
Well, so what?
No, people care.
I
People
know
care.
People care, but
And so
They
you
can
have
move
to make
forward without
sure, that you're staying on top of things. Now, I'm losing a lot of sleep. I know more about airport operations than I ever wanted to know. I also had to go back to my financial background and get back into that again. So, but that's okay. But you brought up some
I've been saying from the beginning.
good discussion.
The only answer is change the charter.
Yeah.
And while we're at it, we should change a bunch of things while we're going to vote.
Yeah. But this is and at the end of the day, when you talk about payment, and that's the last thing I wanted to say, when you talk about payment, we don't pay anything if we decide not to do anything.
Right.
But that information is gonna be so valuable to us, so valuable to us. So we wouldn't have lost anything if you don't. And if you do get a deal, if you decide that you want to move forward, the amount of money that was used for this expiration is going to be a very small percentage of what the end would be.
No, I understand, but if Jeffrey is right, doesn't matter. We can all say no, we can all vote no. Our vote means nothing.
My concern is, and I'm not an expert on the charter, but my understanding is all from the Missouri Constitution, all public funds must be appropriated.
Right.
And I'm concerned about a deferred appropriation. That doesn't make sense to
Oh,
me.
now that's another thing that cannot happen either, and the comptroller has made all that very clear. Now, you know there is no way we can spend money.
But we're obligating ourselves to paying whatever this consulting fee is if we decide to move forward with this privatization.
As it stands now, that comes through here.
But so if 2 years from now, they decide to privatize and there's $2 million worth of consulting fees, and we're gonna get $100 million, and of course I'm just making these numbers
Oh,
up.
yeah.
So now we're gonna get we're gonna get $98 million because $2 million will be
Right.
taken off the top. But the contract would be for $100 million, so that $2 million has to be appropriated.
And
And we're
that's,
agreeing to something,
no, because at the end of the day, all of this still has to be negotiated. Right now, all you have is conversation.
okay, so but the Alderman from the 20th said that there's a percentage of the the
100%.
consulting fee must be paid for by the city, right?
Must be paid for out of the proceeds.
Out of
That
the
was,
Proceeds.
that is precisely
And we
the
don't-
deal written in the
And do we know
contract.
exactly how much that's
We
gonna be?
don't, but
We have no idea.
we have estimates. There are, according to Tony Messenger, what was sunshined was contracts for the amount of $684,000 set per month with allowances for up to $800,000 per month. Now, we've been doing this for about 2 years. So you can
Well, the
estimate,
contract was signed last August,
yes.
so it's
almost.
not quite a year yet.
So I would guess we're at about 10 million so far. And Madam Chairwoman, you said that we're not going to be expecting a full culmination of this soon, right?
Oh, no.
So we're not expecting one during our break, not until we come back into session.
We don't
should
even
not.
have the information in front of us to put out an RFQ.
So there's
You
no.
gotta do the
Okay.
RFQ first, you gotta get the responses back, you gotta analyze it, you gotta determine, and then you gotta put an RFP out.
Okay, so there's
So
no
the-
concern about having that done during break?
There's no way on earth that can be done.
Okay, that's good to know, so that when we ask for these legal opinions, we don't have to expedite them before we go on break.
Expedite them anyway.
Please.
Great, so, but that being said, we should be expecting that we will not have a contract before us until we return from break.
Oh, there's no
At the-
way.
Okay, so then, but that would add at least, I mean, we're guessing $800,000 a month. We know that Chicago, for example, paid on the lower end of at least $12 million for
Right.
their independent study of looking at airport privatization. And that was just the monies that was sort of available to the public. I don't know if there was, our financial analysts
But the
indicated
other
there could
thing you
have been more
do
paid.
is when you're negotiating with the folks with your RFP, is you know what your expenses are. So you're gonna make sure that whatever your intent is for your projects, the cost of the projects that you'd like to see happen, you add enough to cover those expenses as well. And so the investor has to pay it.
Right, but as the alderman pointed out, there is a concern making sure that we have, say, we just came from a HUD's committee where I have to give credit to the chairman, alderman from the 17th Ward, for renegotiating a sort of a contract that was put before the Board of Aldermen right there on the floor, and he almost single-handedly halved the incentive package provided by the city of St. Louis. So, you know, this Board of Aldermen has a wide amount of authority and a wide amount of responsibility to review these contracts to make sure, and we do a good job often down here negotiating. At least we add a level of scrutiny and a layer of scrutiny that has a real impact and is an important piece of the overall incentive package. And so we need to be involved in that negotiation, and we need to make sure by way of a formal legal opinion from our city councilor that we do have the authority and we do have a say, as the alderman from the 23rd pointed out. You know, we need to make sure that at the end of the day we don't just get to jump up and down and scream, but we have an actual vote in the process. So this is a really, perhaps not having quorum was a
better thing.
because we've had some good
Just
discussion here, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. So we know that we have two action things that we will get done on behalf of having a better understanding of the position of the Board of Aldermen in this process. And we are going down next week, so we know that when we come back, we'll have some new information, and we'll work on it probably while we're out anyway, and try to figure out some things. And of course, I am going to ask that the co-sponsor works with legal on your bill, okay? Please.
It's just, yeah, that's just.
I'm refusing to get involved
Sure.
for a number of
I
reasons.
understand.
Okay.
I understand.
So, I wanted to tell everybody. So, the airport director has indicated that next Wednesday, she can do the full tour of the airport, and you have opportunity. Any alderperson who wants to attend can come and, see what's going on. And if you're interested, Tracy is sending out a memo today. Let her know so that we can accommodate the right size bus for the tour. And I've asked for our regional FAA representative to be there as well. Okay?
Now, that's lunch included, is that like a 4-hour tour or
It
something
took
like
us
that?
about 3 hours, I think, the last
Is that
time.
with lunch, or is it starting early?
I don't know what time we started, I
It's
forgot
usually
that.
Sandwiches, it's usually like a box.
Box lunch, yeah.
Right. I'm just wondering,
They take you out on.
We'll feed you,
one-way.
one way or the other.
I've been on
Yeah.
one, but there's been a lot happening since
A
before
lot.
I went out.
I think it's even since the last one I took, over a year ago, so it's a lot, yeah. Okay.
Will there be a rain date for anybody who's unable to attend? It's okay if there's not. Just
No, that's hard to put together and time consuming for them, yeah. So, try to figure it out if you can. And then maybe like 3 months down the road or something, I'll ask her to do another one, okay? Yeah. Yeah, we got plenty of time, so if there's more discussion, according to this agenda that I must follow, we have no resolutions. All our committee discussions are completed. I've made the only announcement I have. Anybody else have another announcement?
I guess not, we couldn't approve the minutes from the prior meeting, so.
No, sir.
We're just hanging out.
Okay, so we ask for adjournment.
Just a minute.
Thank you.